Our next speaker was always a fan of show and tell when she was a child. It was on. Whether it was sharing her favorite teddy bear, Tebby, not Teddy, but Tebby, with her kindergarten class, or going so far as to bring a full jar of roly-polies, much to the horror of her second grade teacher. But a favorite for the kids, I'm sure. This morning she hopes that a few pictures will help her support her story, telling as she endeavors to complete her 8th speech, Visual Aids. Welcome.
How many of you here will admit to keeping a diary? Anyone? Fantastic. Well, I'll admit to you that I have kept a journal in some way, shape, or form for differing periods of time since I was about 8 years old. And that's a picture of my actual shelf full of journals. I always kind of fall off the wagon, though, when I'm keeping a paper journal, and after a month or two, I just kind of stop writing in them altogether. But then about 12 years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to a website called LiveJournal. So for those of you who aren't familiar, LiveJournal is essentially a blog website that allows people to start their own pages where they can go and journal. And LiveJournal has really existed since before the days when blogging became really popular. And actually, I think it existed since before the time when the word blog even became part of our vernacular. So I've had a LiveJournal since I was 22 years old. 22. You can only imagine how much my life has changed since then. But on LiveJournal, my life as a 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old still exists in the written word. It transcends time. The other day, though, my husband Jason and I were sitting on the porch of an evening, like little old people with our glasses of wine. We kind of enjoy that. When we realized that we had started dating 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Now, he and I were good friends before we ever started dating, so trying to pin down an exact point or an exact date when we started dating was kind of difficult. But as I'm sitting there, I remembered my LiveJournal. So I pulled out my phone and started flipping through my archives, and it just so happened that the first date I landed on was the day that we say we fell in love. It had been exactly 10 years to the day from the day that we say that we fell in love. So this is what I found, and I'm actually going to read it to you. That's right, read it. I'm using my notes, pardon me. This is what I wrote, and that was my journal from July 17th, 2002. I went straight to Jay's after work last night. I so envy his new apartment. It's very cute. I helped him unpack just a little bit while he made his dinner. Fajitas, yum. We ate at his little table and we watched a funny thing happen on the way to the forum. We eventually ended up stretched out in the middle of his living room floor, laughing and making fun of the movie. Sammy and Autumn stopped by for a bit, and Jay came across his box of Legos. We sat in the middle of the floor and played and talked for a bit and just had a really good time. After Sammy and Autumn left, Jason and I decided to walk over to the playground in the complex. We sat on the swings and played, and I flew as high as I could into the air and laughed like a child while he laid back in the swing and did the same thing. We moved over to the jungle gym next, stopping on our way for a trip down the slide, and climbed up to the top to sit and talk. We sat there, perched high atop the playground for more than 2 hours. It wasn't until his back started to ache and my behind did the same that we migrated back to the swings. It was then that I looked at my watch. My God, it's 1:45. He replied, who cares? It sounds a bit ridiculous, I suppose, but those 3 hours in that playground were some of the most wonderful in recent memory. I don't believe I've ever opened myself up and been so readily accepted, and I know he felt the same way. I occasionally close up while I'm in the midst of a conversation. I lose my words and drift off to a place somewhere inside my own head. But last night that didn't happen, at least not in the way it normally does. The few times I was quiet were simply because I had stopped to contemplate our theories, philosophies, and observations. To truly be understood is such a wonderful thing. Building a friendship slowly over time is a neat thing. We've always had fun together, always been able to talk, but there's been a lot there that's had a really slow progression, and I've learned to truly appreciate that. He's a wonderful friend, and I'm a lucky girl. I was so excited to have found that journal entry the other day, and it was even more amazing that I found it exactly to the day a decade after I'd written it. And it really got me thinking about where my notes are. No, it really got me thinking about how much of my life is encapsulated within that journal, and how much I can enjoy going back and reading all of the bits and pieces of the history of my life. Some of it is really, really difficult to read, but some of it is so wonderful, and when I go back and look at it, I'm lucky enough to find little bits and pieces of my life that I might have forgotten. So as I mentioned, I've had my journal for 12 years now, and about 5 years ago, I decided to convert it all into a PDF. I made it into a book. And at that time, I had over 3,500 entries in my journal. And some of it, like I said, is so difficult to read, but some of it is so wonderful. Sadly, I haven't written anything in my journal of anything that is really important anyway in several years. I spend most of my time writing a post or two a day on stupid Facebook. And I know that 10 years from now, I'm going to have a really tough time trying to look back for a little piece of history like I did the other day and finding it so perfectly ready for me to remember. So what I'd like to leave you with today is just a reminder and a little bit of inspiration to remember to write down the little bits and pieces of your life, especially the big pieces. You may feel like you'll never forget, but if you're able to go back at some point in the future and read it in your own words, you'll be amazed at how much more you'll remember. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I just highly recommend it. Thank you.